Well, it turns out Houston's spineless chief is now accompanied by at least one spineless officer who done messed up.
You done messed up, Aaron!
I got you. Yeah, I will defend my brothers. I will defend the weak. I will pursue and fight evil so others may sleep. I am the sheepdog, protecting the night. Wolf hunters unite. Bring it on. It's time to fight.
In a video that I published on February 5th that left 2 homeowners and their dog deceased, as well as 4 Houston police officers shot and a 5th injured, I said this. This video is not about the details of that incident per se, but about the response that came from that incident from both the police union president, Joe Grimaldi, and police chief, Art Acevedo. I bring this up real quick because many people began to mistake my video to be about the incident itself, which I was trying to be clear it was not about. It was about the response of a police chief to the police officers union president regarding the idea that to say that people who call for violence against police officers is somehow in some way over the top. I made it very clear in my pinned comment on that same video, where I said, this video isn't about the actual incident itself. I say this in the video. It's about the statements of the union president and response of the chief. 2, narcotics had been purchased by informant at this location, something that is now changed and I will talk about. A legal warrant was obtained and executed. Narcotics were recovered inside the home, contrary to what some commenters are asserting based on information that is bad or removed from the situation. And lastly, and most importantly in this follow-up video, I try to do my due diligence and asked officers about the situation to make sure I was understanding things in context. But I'm always open to making sure that if I did say something incorrectly or get my facts wrong, that I come back and correct them and myself. Even with me attempting to be extremely clear and upfront about what that video is about and what it wasn't about, people are now coming back to me. This is an example on Twitter. You're gonna make a vid where you eat your words about the Houston raid situation since all the new info has come out. I reply, of course, yep. You gonna change your attitude though? So I feel it was important and timely to make a follow-up video in which I bring the new information to light and explain a little bit about it. Now that 2 officers, Goins and Bryant, have been relieved of their duties pending this investigation that is ongoing. What hasn't been released in the news just yet, but I am aware from speaking with officers in the area that you can expect to be hitting sometime soon, is a 911 tape where a woman calls and says that her daughter was in that particular house doing drugs and she needed officers to intervene. That is how officers became aware that narcotics were coming or going or being used in this home. So there's a lot of speculation that this was the wrong house. This was a complete botch job, that they were going to hit one house and went to the wrong house, and that there was a cover-up because they went to the wrong house. That information should be getting dispelled soon, but that doesn't make what happened with this situation really any better. It seems to me, based on my experience, that what we have here is officers trying to take a shortcut. You've got bad guys, but you decided to go the wrong way to get there, and in doing so, you perverted justice. And this is a huge problem, ethically, legally, morally, all of the above, and it is an action that I and others condemn wholeheartedly, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But what is coming to light through this investigation is that the affidavit seems to have been falsified on some level. Some of the information in there that was critical to obtaining the warrant that was executed on the home. For those of you unfamiliar with the process, let me explain this in a very quick fashion. You have 2 parts to the idea of getting and executing a warrant. The affidavit is the getting of it, and the warrant is the executing of it. On the affidavit side, you have an officer or officers who will list witnesses, evidence, information on the probable cause for why a warrant should be issued. When it comes to executing things like a warrant on a house, a search warrant on a home, you have knock and no knock, you have information on the layout of the house, you're describing the house, you're putting a lot of detail into this to explain to the judge or magistrate why a warrant should be issued and what type of warrant should be issued, like the no-knock situation. The judge or magistrate reviews that. The officer or officers then swear to that affidavit. They are saying under oath, this is true to the best of my knowledge. In this case, the warrant was approved, but it appears that the affidavit has been falsified on some level. So Goins had said in the affidavit that basically confidential informants had purchased narcotics from there. The investigation so far has yielded 0 confidential informants that ever worked with him saying that they had purchased narcotics from that home or homeowners. Then you have Officer Bryant, who had said that he had taken and tested heroin that was from the inside of the house. It turns out that that came from the patrol car of Goins, but he had never actually seen it in the house or coming from the house. And so the testimony of these 2 officers building the probable cause to get the warrant in the first place, there's some shadiness going on there. Again, more details I'm sure will emerge, but all signs are pointing to something that was completely in the wrong on the affidavit side, which means that the warrant should have never been issued, which means that that execution of the warrant, everything that happens after it because it was falsified to get it, is something that is now going to be dealt with on a completely different level than if it had been a fair and just way to obtain it. Again, these 2 officers have been relieved of duty while the investigation is continuing. I just want to throw out 3 things in response to this before we wrap the video up. First is that these actions should be rightfully condemned, and I am doing that right here, right now. I join with the Houston police officers president, Joe Gamaldi, when he said that he was extremely concerned and disturbed by these allegations that came to light Friday, and that they were not indicative of the performance of the rest of the department's 5,200 officers. And I spoke to him personally, and he affirmed this part where he pledges to back any reforms needed to avoid similar misconduct in the future. So this is an example of how it should work. Like, yeah, he has issues with the chief and how he was treated recently, but he's saying like, no, we need to do whatever is necessary to fix this so that this can't happen again. Whatever reforms the department wants to put in place, we back that because we don't want any of this. In 10 years of law enforcement career that I've been a part of, I'm telling you, this is not representative of what officers condone, support, promote, encourage, none of the above. This is damaging. Not only is it illegal, but it is damaging to even the very perception of law enforcement, something that we need to be working hard to fix those false perceptions, and this sets us back. Even when you look at the objective information that most of the time officers are doing exactly what they're supposed to do, when they don't, it makes it that much harder because of the nature of how information is exchanged and passed around on social media particularly, that it is so hard to overcome those negative perceptions, and it just puts us all in a worse position. Next, and I hesitate to use this term like a silver lining in this situation because I'm not like looking for justification at all, but I think it is valuable for those of you that are looking at this and going like, man, this sucks. How do I trust the police? And that perception issue that is there, for what it's worth, this information about these officers came as a result of an internal investigation. Other police officers investigated this and brought this to light. They are the ones trying to do justice. They're trying to do it right. They can't make up for what happened that was wrong. They simply can't. It doesn't work that way. But they can be honest about it. They can be objective about it. They can say, hey, these are the officers we've identified that we know for sure have falsified information, or we believe them to, that's the allegation, and we are going to keep digging at this. And it's officers that brought that internally. You got to understand that police officers are under a tremendous amount of scrutiny, not only from the community, not only from cameras, cell phone, media, all the fishbowl life of being a cop, dash cams, body cams, etc. But internally, there is a tremendous amount of oversight in the world of policing. You may not believe that, especially when you're looking at a situation like this and you're like, yeah, prove it. Well, the problem is that 98 or 99% of what cops do isn't on social media. It isn't in the media. It's the problems that show up there. So again, I'm not trying to justify it. I'm not trying to say like, oh, but here's the good part of this. But it is objectively a good thing that officers are willing to investigate their own and put them out there and be open and honest and transparent about it, like exactly what is happening here in this situation. Finally, just understand that in the real world, we're just not gonna find perfection, but we can approach things objectively and reasonably. And we need to be just honest. We need to be honest about it. It looks like in this situation that you had some bad guys in that house. You have narcotics activity. It is important to know there was illegal narcotics taken from that particular house. It wasn't that they were probably blameless people. However, getting the right people the wrong way, it was wrong. And so that's not the way to go about it. So if this officer decided to take a shortcut to try to justify himself, that is not something that is called police work. But let's be real. This isn't the last time a cop is going to do something wrong. It's not the last time that we'll ever even hear about a mistake. This was more than a mistake. I'm just saying cops doing something wrong, mistakes happening, that's part of real life. And it's how we respond that's going to make the difference. We need to eliminate this idea of cognitive dissonance when it comes to the conversation of policing and community and the perception, right? Because I'm not over here saying like, well, yeah, they did this wrong, but what about this over here that's wrong, and try to divert the attention to someone else or something else that makes them look as bad as us. But the same thing can happen on the other side, where it's like, see, this is exactly why I hate the police, and you are unwilling to admit that there's other problems in the community causing the police to need to even be involved in it, but it's the police's fault. So there's these volleyings that can happen where we're just hurling insults and situations back and forth at each other, not being willing to listen, not being willing to be objective and honest about it. So this is me doing exactly what I say that I'm committed to doing, which is being objective and reasonable, and where I made mistakes. So when I was under the impression and the belief that this was the right house, well, it might have been the right house, but the way that they got into that house appears to be completely wrong. But as we look at the situation and others like it, we need to be as objective and reasonable in our approach as possible. Speak calmly, speak factually, and that's what matters. That is what's going to make the difference, is the matter of facts. Not these feelings and emotions that get stirred up because of these things, but because of something that we can objectively look at and be reasonable about. Even if you disagree, that's okay, but we need to be able to disagree based on actual information and not hype, and not just false things that are spread around on social media very often as well. So wrapping it up, investigators are now looking at all of Goins' past cases. That could be a huge problem, because if this is shown to be falsified, then it's going to call into question his integrity as an officer in past cases, and that could lead to a lot of backtracking over cases and a lot of things being overturned. There's a lot of different directions this could go, so we'll just have to keep an eye on it and see what happens. Chief Acevedo said that he's assigned Assistant Chief Pedro Lopez to take a broader look, quote, to make sure that we're not being myopic, that we look at our entire narcotics operation out there in terms of our street level units, and they'll be conducting a very extensive audit. I truly hope that if these officers are found in the wrong by the evidence, that not only do they lose their jobs, but they are charged criminally as well, and find themselves on the receiving end of the due penalty for their actions. All right, guys, wherever you saw this video, subscribe or follow, share it, hit whatever notification thing exists, and we will see you next time. Man, thanks, Wendy's.